Hello and welcome to Math with Mrs. Havrilla. This is Mrs. Havrilla and today we are working on Unit 4, Lesson 2. In our lesson today, we used area diagrams to help us find the products of larger numbers. So here in the example, you can see that we are working on the equation 315 times 24. And they've set up two different area models, and students were able to decide which area model was best for them. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working through area models in order to solve various multiplication problems. The first one that we have here for number 1 is the equation 245 times 42. So I'm going to go ahead and write that up here on my board. 245 times 42. And you can see I have two different area models here. What they want us to do is they want us to fill in the partial products for both of these area models and then pick which one we prefer and say why. So I'm going to take you through the process of how to fill these in. I'll start with A. So I'm going to go ahead and draw an area model. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm going to try to make it look like the one in the picture, which means it's 3 spaces across and 2 spaces down. They've decomposed the number 245 into 245, and they've decomposed the numbers 42 into 40 and 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start solving in these boxes. In order to do an area model, each box is going to come up with a partial product. And I get that by looking up at the number above and looking left at the number to the side. So I can see in this first box I have 200 on top and 40 on the side. So that means that this box represents the equation 200 times 40. Now, I can use my rule of zeros here, and I can pretend that there are no zeros on this number, turning my 200 into 2 and my 40 into 4. And it looks like 2 times 4. I know that 2 times 4 is 8. So I'm going to put 8. And then I'm going to count how many zeros total there are. 1, 2, 3 total zeros. I'll add those 3 zeros onto my 8. So 200 times 40 is 8,000. In my next box, when I look up, I see 40. When I look left, I see 40, which means this box represents 40 times 40. I'll follow that same rule of zeros, covering up each of the zeros in turn, making it 4 times 4. I know that 4 times 4 is 16, and I covered up 2 zeros, so I have to add 2 zeros onto my number to make it 1,600. In this last box on the top, I look up and I see a 5. I look left and I see a 40. That represents 5 times 40. I can cover this 0 up and do 5 times 4, which I know is 20. And then I'm going to add this 0 back on to get 200. When I add all 3 of these partial products up off to the side, I end up with 9,800. Now I'm going to repeat the process on the bottom, noticing that on the left, I now have a 2 instead of a 40. So on my bottom square, I look up and see 200. I look left, I see 2. 200 times 2 is going to give me 400. In my next box, I look up, I see 40. I look left, I see 2. 40 times 2 is 80. And in my last box, I look up, I see 5. I look left, I see 2. 5 times 2 is 10. which means that my bottom row is going to be 490. Now, all I have to do is add these two partial products together to get my final answer. When I do that, I can stack it vertically. 0 and 0 is 0. 9 and 0 is 9. 4 and 8 is 12, so I'll place the 2, carry the 1, and 1 and 9 is 10. I end up with 10,290 for that first area model. Now I'm going to go ahead and erase that and do B. With B, I'm using the same equation. I'm just decomposing the number in a different way. So you'll notice that on this picture, they just have 42 on the left-hand side. They didn't break it into 40 and 2. So I'll go ahead, I'll make my area model. I don't need to split it on the side, so I'll only split it on top. Decomposing 245 into 245, and then just putting 42 on the side. Now you're going to notice that I have to do 42 times 200. Now that one's a little bit trickier for me to solve. I'm still going to use my rule of zeros, so I'm going to cover up the 2 zeros that I have here and just do 42 times 2. Well, I know that 42 times 2 is going to be 84. And then I'll add 2 zeros onto the end. Next, I have 40 times 42. Again, this is pretty tricky to solve. It actually requires me to do a lot of decomposing in my head, because what I'm really doing is I'm doing 40 times 40, and then I'm doing 40 times 2. Well, I know that 40 times 40 is the same as 4 times 4 with 2 zeros on the end. 4 times 4 is 16, 2 zeros on the end is 1600. Then I have to do 40 times 2 to get 80, which means that in this box, I end up with 1,680 total. Notice how not breaking it up on the side here, not decomposing it, is making it a lot more difficult for me to fill in these slots. In my last slot, I have 5 and 42. So 5 times 42. Again, this one's not super easy for me to just solve in my head. For me, I know that 5 is half of 10. So what I'll do is I'll do 420, which is 10 times 42. And then I'll take that 420 and I'll split it in half, since 10 is half of, or 5 is half of 10. So 420 split in half is going to give me 210. I would then add all of those numbers together. This one I really am going to stack on top of each other just because it's 3 products here. And I should have ended up with the same number I had before. Now, doing both of those area models, I noticed that the second one, B, was a lot harder for me to solve than A. So down in my box where I have to pick which one I prefer, I would say that I prefer A. So I would literally take here where it says, which do you prefer? And I would say the diagram I prefer is A. And then I would say why. I would say because the 42 is not decomposed, it makes it a lot harder for me to solve. And I'm having to do a lot more mental math that isn't as easy as when I'm breaking the 40 into 40, or the 42 into the 40 and 2. So hopefully you were able to fill in both of those area models and pick which one you preferred and why. Remember, you didn't have to pick the same one I picked. It's whichever one you prefer. On the back, we have an equation, and we have 4 different area models that we have to look at to pick which one is going to represent our equation. So the equation is 411 times 31. For A, we have an area model that has it split 2 by 2. We have 10 and 1 on the top. We have 430 on the side. Now, when I'm creating an area model, the numbers that are on the same side are the decomposed numbers that make up a bigger number. So for example, if I had the number 411, I know that it's going to decompose into 400, 10, and 1. But here on the side, I have a 400 and a 30, which makes up the number 430. So that's not going to be right. I have the same problem when I look at the top. I have a 10 and a 1. And if I put those together, that equals 11. But I need it to be 31. So that means A cannot be the one that we're going to use. I'm going to go over to A, and I'm just going to cross it out because that will not find the product of 411 times 31. Now I'm going to look at the next area model. The next area model is split just right down the side, and we have 411 and we have 31. But notice when I do that, there's nothing on the top. So when I'm going into each box to solve, I know that in order to solve, I have to look up and I have to look left. If there's nothing on top, then that's like 0. And 411 times 0 is 0. 31 times 0 is 0, which means that this is not going to give us the correct product. I'm going to go ahead and cross out B. For C, I've got one line across my horizontal side here, and I have it broken up into 400 and then 31. And on top, I have 11. When I look at these two numbers and put them together, it creates the number 431. 431 is not the number I'm multiplying. And I shouldn't be multiplying times 11, I should be multiplying times 31, which means that C is also not going to give me my correct product. Let's go ahead and look at D and figure out why it is that D works. So for D, I can see that it's split one line across my horizontal side, one line vertically, and I have 411 on the top, and I have 30 and 1 on the side. When I put together 411, I get 411. When I put together 30 and 1, I get 31, which means that when I'm multiplying, looking up and looking left, I'm going to be multiplying 411 times 31, which is the one that I wanted to do, which means my answer is D. My last problem here is number 3, and it says to just find the product and use the diagram if it helps you. So we have some diagrams here, and I'm going to take you through the steps on how to fill those diagrams in. So the first one I have is I have a 256 on top, and I have a 35 on my left-hand side. That represents my equation 256 times 35. In order to make this into an area model, I need to look at how many digits I have in my number. In my first number, I have 1, 2, 3 digits, which means across the top, I need 3 spaces. In my second number, I have 2 digits, which means across the top, I need across the side, I need 2 spaces. Now I can decompose. 256 becomes 256. 35 becomes 35. Now I can multiply. When I'm in my first square, I look up and see 200. I look left and see 30. This represents 200 times 30. I can follow that rule of zeros, covering the zeros up. That leaves me with 2 times 3. And 2 times 3 is 6. Then I'm going to add 1, 2, 3 zeros back onto that. 1, 2, 3, and I get 6,000 in my first square. In my next square, I look up, 50, left is 30, so I have 50 times 30. I'll cover the 0 up to get 5 times 3, and 5 times 3 is 15. Now I can add 1, 2 zeros onto the end to get 1,500. In my last box on the top, I see a 6, and then I see a 30, so I have 6 times 30. I'll do 6 times 3 to get 18, and then I'll add a 0 onto the end. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to take these 3 partial products and I'm going to add them up down here on the bottom. I find that adding it up one row at a time really helps me to organize my information, because otherwise I'm going to end up with 6 different partial products and it's going to be a lot of numbers to add. Once I add it, I get 7,680 across the top. Next, I'm going to do the bottom row. So I look up, I see 200. I look left, I see 5. I'm going to treat that 200 as if it were 2 and do 2 times 5 to get 10. But then I have to add my 1, 2 zeros onto the end to get 1,000. In my next box, I look up, I see 50. I look left, I see 5. And again, I'm going to cover the 0 and do 5 times 5 to get 25. Adding this 1 0 back onto the end to get 250. In my last box, I look up, I see 6. I look left, I see 5. And 6 times 5 is 30. Now I'll add together these partial products. And once I add them together, I can see that I get 1,280. Now that I have both of these, I'm going to add them together to get my final product. For A, I ended up getting 8,960. Now, it's important to remember that number 3 says to find the product and to use the diagram if it helps you. That means if you're a person that prefers to do the standard algorithm for multiplication or our partial product strategy, don't feel like you have to use these area models for number 3. It's only if you need the area model in order to solve. If you do standard algorithm and set them up vertically off to the side, like so, you may also do that. But just know that you should also get the same answer that I got. All right, we've got one more to go and then we're done. All right, it's a little squeaky. My last equation, I can see that I have 734 and 26. So my equation is 734 times 26. And I'll draw my box for my area model. Now, I have 3 digits in my first number, so I need 3 spaces across the top. I have 2 digits in my second number, so I need 2 spaces along the side. I'll decompose 734 into 730, 30 and 4. And then I'll decompose 26 into 26. Starting in my first box, I have 700 times 20, looking up and looking left. Well, I can pretend like those zeros aren't even there, and I can do 7 times 2 to get 14. Then I can add 1, 2, 3 zeros to get 14,000. In my next box, I have 30 times 20. Again, I'm pretending like the zero is not even there, and I'm just gonna do 3 times 2 to get 6. Then I'm gonna add 1, 2 zeros back onto that to get 600. In my last box, I have 4 times 20, which I can do 4 times 2 to get 8, and then add that 0 back on to get 80. I'll add these partial products down here at the bottom. And I end up with 4,680. And then I'll move on to my second row. I look up, I see 700. I look left, I see 6. I can treat that as 7 times 6, which is going to give me 42. And then I'm going to add these 2 zeros back onto the end. Next, I'm going to look up, I see 30. I'm going to look left, I see 6. 3 times 6 is 18. And I'll bring my 0 down to get 180. And last, I have 4 times 6 to get 24. I'm going to go ahead and add these off to the side. And I end up with 4,404. Then I'm going to add these 2 numbers together to get my final product. My final product for B was 19,084. And remember, if you use standard algorithm, just put it off to the side. Remember to check in tomorrow for help with tomorrow's homework.